These are tools, not toys. Bear them well and wisely.
All right, we are here with Lukas Fabian in Sweden. We've never been to Sweden before. Important looking pirates. And this is where you're located. It's beautiful. Is it along a river or something?
Yeah, it's actually the ocean. But yeah, it's super nice there. We can jump into the water in summer and just swim right outside the office. That's pretty cool.
You guys do that? You literally just take
I
a quick
have been
dip?
told that this happened in the past.
Okay.
I didn't do it yet, but yeah, I only joined last summer during COVID. So, but I'm looking forward to this summer and actually doing that.
Wow, that's pretty cool. You got some fancy looking buildings over here. This looks like almost historical. You guys.
It is. This is Stockholm city center, and it's pretty much next to the palace where the king still lives and stuff. So that's yeah, it's a pretty historic environment.
Well, sir, I'll let you take the reins. Would you like to introduce yourself? Obviously, your name is Lukas Fabian, and hopefully I got that name right.
Pretty much, yeah. In German, we would pronounce it Fabian.
Fabian.
But besides that,
Lukas
yeah.
Fabian. Okay.
But exactly. But besides that, it's correct. Yeah. People usually get more confused that those are two like first names, but Fabian is actually my last name. So.
I guess I'll introduce. Do you want to do an introduction or of who you are and or should I? You know, I'll bring you through. I'll bring you through.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
you started out in robotics. Am I wrong about that?
No, that's correct. Wow, you did some research. Yes. Exactly.
I hate people that do interviews that don't do any research. You know, it's like, who are you? You know. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to engineering school and I got an engineering degree in mechatronics.
Yeah, this is a pretty high-tech school, huh?
Yeah, it is. It was a really, really good time, and we have. This is kind of a special school. I think this kind of school only exists in Austria because it's not a university. So I started when I was 15, 16 doing that, and I graduated with 19, 20. And got my degree there already. So it's a little bit below a bachelor's degree, but still really, really cool stuff. And we actually learned how to build robots, from scratch, like the mechanical part of it, the electronical part of it, and the software or firmware part of it. Yeah, that was really good times.
Now, was there any like CG element of this that transitioned you into compositing, or were you just like, hey, I like this?
No, for me, this was something totally different, and I was always interested in movies and visual effects. That comes from my father, who was well into movies as well. So whenever we had a movie night with my family, my father usually would pick the making of afterwards, and my brothers and my mother would leave and make dinner or whatever, do something else, get along with their days. And I would stay with my father and watch all the behind-the-scenes material that we could find on whatever movie.
That's funny because I have the same relationship with my dad. He introduced me to all of this. He's a baby boomer. I'm a Gen Xer. So, but it seems like a generation of passing on. You go to the theater with your father. You know, he shows you these films that are his favorites, and they become your favorites, oddly enough, because there's a part of you and your dad. So, I don't know.
Yeah, totally. That happened. I mean, I got introduced to Star Wars and all that stuff in the late 90s. That was a good time. And then after school, I mean, there was no school that would get me into visual effects around that as a teenager. And back then, software wasn't as available as it is today, so I couldn't really get my hands on anything. So I chose to do the engineering school, which was super cool. And then when I was done with that, I actually got my hands onto a copy of After Effects, and I found some Andrew Kramer video Copilot tutorials. I was like, okay, nice. Now I can start learning how to do lightsabers. in After Effects.
They should have a lightsaber college.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
that would
Andrew
be awesome,
Kramer's
actually.
lightsaber 101.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, he
welcome.
actually did, I think, 2 plugins. He did some nice presets in After Effects, and later he bought his plugin, Saber or something, for After Effects. Yeah, but that came much later.
So then, obviously, you graduated, and all of a sudden, if I go back to your LinkedIn here, where's your LinkedIn at? There it is. So you started out at freelancing at Production All-Rounder. I'm assuming that just means you're freelancer. And then post-production supervisor at Rafal Studios.
Exactly. That was a small film production company in Vienna that was started by a good friend of mine. And it was around that time when I graduated and got into like post-production, and I was doing After Effects. I was just to learn After Effects. I needed to learn some editing, and then I learned about color grading, and I was doing kind of all these post-production steps and things. And yeah, this friend of mine, he started a company mainly getting into corporate videos, commercials, and short films and stuff. And they were looking for people who were who had knowledge with post-production. And I just raised my hand and said, I kind of know that stuff. So I got hired, and we started out that company as a like small little startup, and did some really cool, again, mainly commercial work in Vienna. And I was responsible for pretty much the whole post-production workflow there. And that was a really great experience, since we were kind of learning by doing. And like, we have this client who wants to give us a load of money to get a commercial done. So now we have to deliver. How do we actually do that? And especially with post-production and grading processes and VFX, and then getting into color theory and all those kind of things to actually be able to do a production. That was what I was doing there, like pretty much straight out of school.
So were you like, were you looking for jobs in robotics, but all of a sudden a friend came along and say, hey, there's some good opportunity here. Why don't you jump on board? And you're like, oh yeah, sure, I know a little bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I was applying for some robotic jobs, but more on the like low end, because I was doing this movie and visual effects stuff at home, which I was really into it. But my parents were like, no, you need to apply for jobs. You need to get something. So I was doing that, but I wasn't really that much into that back at the time. So that didn't work out. And then my friend came along, and I was like, oh yeah, great. If you want to pay me for doing stuff like this, that's awesome.
It's interesting because a lot of the artisans out in LA and different places, they start out, you know, back in the 70s and 80s when people got into Star Wars, not everybody was some artiste from some fancy artist school. They were just Joe Schmoes that got hired on at a studio, and they just learned by doing, and they eventually became artists. And it's just like, you know, it's just by, hey, I just happened to fall into a job that a friend of mine did, and I got really good at it because I was in production, basically, you know, as opposed to like, I went to school and I was, you know, creme de la creme.
And it's more about, and this is totally about hands-on problem solving. Like, you get a client and you get a target that you have to strive for, and suddenly you need to achieve that, and you have to figure out the solution on the way. That was really interesting.
That's the beauty of compositing too, because it's so much of it is, it's a puzzle, it's a riddle. Every shot, even if it's a shot of something you've done over and over and over again, there's always something in there you got to figure out. You know, that's
exactly.
why
you learn all the time.
That's why I'm a little bit cautious of this copycat node everyone's kind of dogging on, because it's in Nuke, because it's like automated this, and it's like, you know, I'm not going to attack the foundry. I could see where they're going. They're trying to help us, you know. It's just the technology is such in its infancy. But I do believe we're starting to see some really cool results with the alpha channel workflow of that copycat node to get a rough garbage mat, which
Mhm.
is cool. But what I thought about that copycat node was that it would actually interpret the upstream data to a roto node, to a paint node, and it would actually look at those roto splines and give us a new roto spline, but instead it's giving you an RGB mat, which is not
Yeah.
really helpful if you're going to try to, but I mean, the amount of computational power to pull all that off is just, I don't think it's even there yet, I don't know.
Yeah, that's something. But for me, I view it a little bit different. For me, it's getting me into AI research, like which I'm really interested for the future in general. Like it's giving me a tool for the first time, and like going into reading white papers about AI and programming my own plugins with those kind of things is way above my head. But having that as a simple tool inside of Nuke now, I can start play around with it and see where the limitations are, and then I can learn about, okay, which mechanics or which model is that specific node using, and I can do some research on that, and I can start learning and dig deeper and get into the limitations of whatever the copycat node can do, and then maybe try to get beyond. That's pretty much how I developed all my tools. Like you get into a dead end and in any wherever, and you try to figure out the solution for that, and just go one step ahead or further than what Nuke is giving you natively. And that's what I'm looking forward to, like more people getting into AI and learning stuff about that, and just utilizing not just the copycat node, but also the tool that is within the copycat node, and maybe using that as a building block for whatever is there to come.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
And that's getting me super excited, actually.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, I was just, I'm actually using the copycat node in my experimental animation class for my master's I'm getting right now
Oh.
to purposely break the copycat node to give me really crazy results because it's an experimental film. So I got a guy's face getting all warped and crazy from 6 keyframes. And it's the guy's like, "Wah!" And I'm like, oh, this is perfect for experimental animation. You just it's giving you these error results, but they're purposeful in an experimental film. But it allowed me to play a little bit with the tool itself to see where they want to go. But I'm kind of reminded back of how so much of what we do as compositors is almost it's like forensic type brain surgery where we go in and we move things per pixel, and for a computer to interpolate that can be done, I think, at a very slow movement, like you see on the Foundry examples of some kind of like zit on some kid's face and the kid just takes a pan to his left a little bit. But when it comes to really complex stuff of like what I'm doing on Netflix, where it's like you have one CG element, but it's got to be applied to 5 different shots from slightly different angles, it's not going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? We're not there yet. And I don't think Foundry's blind to that. You know what I mean? And I don't think Foundry also doesn't. I don't Foundry bows the knee to these plugins that are like cheap gimmick plugins. They don't go for cheap gimmick plugins when they have something on the initial tool set. It's always something that has a really good purpose that could be applied to the perfectionist results in production, as opposed to, say, a roto paint node in After Effects. We're like, we'll just roto paint it. It's like, no, the edges are going to get frizzy,
Exactly. It's just it's a quick way to do some stuff, but it's not getting you to this feature film high quality bar that clients are expecting.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to your history. So you went from Raphael Studios to Machiavision, and the last time I heard about Machiavision was through Eric Prochnow, who is in Hamburg, and he was mentioning how that's a really big post house.
Yeah.
Did you want to discuss a little bit about that, or?
I mean, after a while, I was working in Vienna for I'm not sure 4 years or something, and then I was more I was the all-rounder there, so I was doing obviously everything that's regarded post-production, but I also did a lot of like being a lighting technician on set, production in general, being a camera assistant, which was awesome, giving me a lot of experience on that kind of side of film production. But I wanted to go more specifically into visual effects. What I was really interested in from my childhood back when I was watching Star Wars making offs with my father. So yeah, that's where this transition came. I met a supervisor there at a computer graphics conference in Vienna, and we talked a little bit. He said, oh yeah, if you want to move to Stuttgart and want to get into this, then we might figure something out. So I applied there, got hired, and stayed there for a couple of years, which was a really great journey as well.
Yeah, Lost in Space Season 2, Star Trek Picard, Watchmen, Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Got a lot of spacey type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There were a lot of, especially recent, in the last couple of years, we got a lot of sci-fi stuff, which I like, so I didn't complain. I started out on my first job there was Game of Thrones, which was very exciting as well. So yeah, we did all kind of different things, a lot of commercial work from time to time, but then getting more into the really complex like feature film and high-end, high-quality streaming or TV series like Watchmen and Lost in Space and stuff.
And then from there, and that was a long period, 3 years, 6 months. That's long for VFX. That's like a lifetime.
Yeah, I kind of like to stay for longer in companies and become really a member of the team and being able to shape some stuff and getting to know the people, getting to know the workflows, and really being part of the part of the company.
Cool. And then you jumped over to Important Looking Pirates. Now, are they a relatively new company? Because I've started just hearing about that, and obviously the name sticks out like a sore thumb. Important Looking Pirates.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest names in the industry. But that's just my personal opinion. They have been around for quite some years. I know they appeared first time on my radar when they did Black Sails, I think season 3 or 4. I saw the first BTS stuff. So they're very good mid-size company, being pretty consistent contenders at the VS Awards and stuff. So that's that. So we are not so new, kind of established, especially in that segment. Again, like high quality stuff.
So obviously, kind of like you were a senior compositor at Macrovision, and then going to a compositor, and I'm assuming you're working your way up to up to senior.
I am a senior.
Oh, you are a senior. Okay, cool.
As well. It's just on LinkedIn, whatever. I'm not that super title specific. So I have I have been assigned as a lead compositor on some shows recently as well. So
that's awesome. Yeah. So
it's
again,
really a down step for me. That was
how is the team at Important Looking Pirates? And the whole workflow, is it pretty? I mean, obviously you can't talk too much about it, but I mean, just the general atmosphere. Everyone seems pretty cool. And is it different than most studios in a certain way, or?
I mean, I haven't worked in that many studios to be able to compare, but so far it has been pretty amazing for me. Obviously, I joined during COVID time, so I haven't even met everybody at ILP because everybody's working from home. So I'm more just getting to know the people I work with closer and like on my project in the team. But that's really good. The vibe very great. The office is super cool, just nicely decorated with a lot of pirate-themed stuff. Everybody's kind of, or most of the people are kind of geeks, and yeah, I enjoy it a lot, being there and being around the people.
And of course, not a lot of people know this, and I'm pretty sure it's still true, unless something had changed. But during the entire time of COVID, Sweden was open all the time. Am I wrong on that?
Kind of, yeah. We got some restrictions in the last couple of months, but yeah, Sweden kind of went that approach where the government is putting out recommendation and hoping that the people are just following them. And ILT, for example, was following them very vividly. Everybody was able to work from home seamlessly, so that at least when I started, that was no issue at all. That was up and running, and all the workflows were established, and that's still up to this day. Most of the people are working from home.
Okay, so when COVID started, Sweden was the one country that kind of was like, no, but did your studio still take precaution immediately in last year in March, or was it just like, let's see what happens, and then when the restrictions came in from the Swedish government later in the game, you guys like, okay, we're gonna have to start going remotely, and you had already moved to Sweden, so you're like, okay, I'll work from home, you know.
I moved a little bit later, so as far as I know, I started just in summer, so COVID was already in the middle of everything going on. But yeah, the studio took precautions, like as far as I know, very early in the game, and like really taking this seriously. Like we need to be able to work with whatever comes. And I mean, we all remember last spring where like all the restrictions and whatever was changing on almost a daily basis. And yeah, but so far for me, it has been very, very smoothly.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, just to double check your IMDb, again, you kind of started with Empires of Evil, Daydreamer, Untouched, Game of Thrones, The Captain, Gladbeck, Jim Button, and Luke, the Engine Driver.
Those are all German feature films.
That's an interesting name for a movie. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's based on a child's book, which was pretty big in Germany.
Is there like a specific flavor of like story and like in Germany versus other, to like specifically probably television as it is localized to that area, right?
Yeah. I'm not that familiar, actually. I mean, I'm not that familiar with anything outside of Germany. It's all just native to me and normal, like, whatever was there. So I'm not sure if that's very specific and different to other countries.
Well, you come from a beautiful country of your origin, man. Do you miss Vienna at all? Or?
I missed it while I lived in Stuttgart. Now that I live in Stockholm, it is more okay, since Stockholm is more similar to Vienna, like a lot of imperialistic buildings from times where kings and emperors ruled over Europe, and having statues around the city of those
like
times.
Colosseum next to your work.
Yeah, exactly, stuff like that. And this is so Stockholm feels very nice, but I enjoy being back in Vienna once in a while as well to visit friends and family there.
Cool. And then we've got Best Friends, Invisible Sue, The Third King, The Reformer, Watchmen, Lost in Space, The Magic King's Three Unlikely Heroes, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, Pan Tau, and then The Mandalorian. So, did you want to talk a little bit about? It's like I jumped over to Important Looking Pirates If you guys are interested, go ahead and it's ilpvfx.com. And they have a reel here, which I'll just play through with the sound down, of the work you guys did on Mandalorian Season 2. Which, from what I would just kind of going through it, you guys have a lot of, like they had some guy with they had the full makeup of the face, but you guys just replaced the center of the face, or you created tentacles, like in this situation. Is there any reason why you guys use blue screen as opposed to green screen on this? Is it just because of matching the general hue of like the sea or whatever? Or?
In that case, I have no idea. I mean, that's decided by the production on set, like what they use there, and we just receive the plates, and they have either blue or green screen in them.
See, this is the shot. Tony and Josh and I are developing a series that we're going to have guest instructors help out on, and it's going to be from junior to mid-level. Like we just had an interview with Xavier Brook, and he said no studio wants to hire rookies. I love how he calls them rookies. Like it's like, like they just want some guys to magically fall down into their hands, and he is a mid-level artist. So that kind of just screws over all the kids going through college and all this, and they're like, how do I get to that level? So I thought, why don't we develop something where I go around Indiana shooting plates, or even some plates on some green screen stages, and do some rather difficult stuff, and see if we can put together lesson plans to get the experience needed, which is obviously rotopaint cleanup, but also maybe a couple of 3D extra shots to get somebody from junior to mid-level artist. And this is the type of shot I would love to see, where you're connecting a 3D set extension all the way to the foreground to background. I think that would be so cool.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, integrating 3D stuff with plate stuff. So that sounds like a really good idea. Looking forward to hear more about that.
Yeah, we're
are cooking there.
I mean, I just think it'd be so cool because you guys are busy. You're working on major stuff. I'm just kind of working a full-time, part-time job for stuff. But I'm going to have, hopefully I won't be too overwhelmed this summer, but I wanted to spend my summer, off, going to college, but also just seeing if we can kind of bridge that gap and not have me teach it, because I don't know what you guys know. I would even consider myself a rookie, so to speak. But to have you guys come on and say, here's a shot, I took the time to shoot the plates, let's see if we can, and I can even render the 3D, but you guys can show how to mend it all together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. Getting some, that's kind of the stuff that Hugo Guerra was doing, right? Showing some real production shots and breaking them down, like what he did there. That's at least my view how he started his YouTube channel, getting this really high quality stuff that you broken down in detail that you would usually not get in that quality.
It's difficult. I mean,
yeah.
No matter if I run out with a camera, the quality of what you see, like when I see the Netflix stuff I'm working on, and the incredibly awesome lighting and the camera movements and all this, you kind of go, okay, I don't have the time or the resources to do that on my own,
Yeah, I'm sure that's some serious production value there.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. I'm learning about the absolute meticulousness and also understanding the Netflix tech checking that goes on, and which is just crazy awesome in the sense that they're like, they find everything. They find everything, stuff that you, even a compositor, like, what? That was there? I played it back 20 times. I didn't see it, So yeah, it's definitely, I have to say, tech checkers take go ahead.
Sometimes it amazes me how long stuff gets through without being noticed. So we had some situations where you're like almost at a tech check level, like this shot has been reviewed 100 times internally and a couple of times at the client's place, and suddenly you would find, wait, is that a crew member in the background? Like, how the hell did we miss him all this time? And then,
was that the whole controversy? There was a crew member in the back of Mandalorian, or no? Was that? am I thinking of a different show?
Oh yeah, there was. There wasn't an ILP shot, so we weren't involved with that. But yeah, true. There happened something like that, and this was a VFX shot since I mean it must have been since there were blaster fire and stuff. So
Well, I mean, it's like looking at an elephant with a microscope. You just look. I
yeah,
don't see anything. I'm looking for rotoline mistakes. I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for some
And
actor.
if I recall it correctly, that was a dark shot in the background, and like I don't even know how fans found that guy. That must have been a really shitty calibrated TV that was way too bright, and suddenly somebody saw that on his home TV.
When I was working at NetherRealm Studios doing cinematics for Mortal Kombat, Paul, who was one of the head compositors there, I'd walk into his office and he'd be with his finger going arrow, 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 going through the frames, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm going through our intro to Mortal Kombat Armageddon," and I'm like, "Why?" You know, and he's just like, "I'm looking for anything the fans can find." He would spend like 4 days on it, and he's like, "What is that?" You know, and I'm just like, "Really? They're that nerdy? They're gonna look for this stuff?" You know? And he's like, "Yes."
I think a lot of big companies and high-profile shows are concerned with that. Like, what could the fans find?
Yeah, but I mean, before Digital Revolution, there was all types of stuff. The old Star Wars movie would have actors in the background behind Han Solo, you know, when he's, you know, it's just like,
Hmm?
it's the big picture with filmmaking. Why do we have to be so, you know, why do we have to chastise companies for making simple, stupid mistakes that no one ever caught on to, you know?
Yeah.
So you got a bunch of fish there. These guys, now, whenever I see these, like, weird characters that almost look like a really simple costume job, it makes me think that somebody over at, you know, like the writers of the show went back into the Star Wars original movies and went, that frog in the background, let's make him into a character, you know. And that frog in the background was never intended to be in the front of the camera because it had such like low quality, you know, movement in the face, you know what I mean? So when I see these two frogs, I go, it seems like they took a character that was just way in the background in the cantina sequence in the original Star Wars movie and said, we're going to make that a big character in this movie.
Maybe that's how it happened. I
Yeah.
don't know, but seems like a plausible explanation.
You know what? You know what's interesting? I'm looking at this shot here, right? And I'm thinking, I've seen this shot before. And I haven't seen this shot before, but I have seen it in Tony Lyons' reel, because he has a shot in Kong Island, I think, where a guy hits a helicopter and flies off to the left of the screen. So it's really weird. I'm like, wait a minute, did I see this shot before? It's like, no. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I guess shot design can be similar between shows. So.
So a lot of well, it's cool. I mean, you guys are showing that blue screen is still used in Mandalorian, you know. So then, okay, so basically you got a lot of like, are you removing the reflections in the eyes here, or your team? I'm assuming that's what you're like. You have the crew in the shot or something.
That was more about augmenting the set prop that they had and getting more movement, more life into the eyes. So we're not removing reflections in that case. We were adding some more additional movement and stuff.
Cool. Anything you'd like to share about the experience working on Mandalorian versus other productions? Obviously, you're under contract not to talk about the details, but
yeah. No, for me it was awesome just because of the property. And I mean, I've said it before. I'm a Star Wars fan since I was a kid. So getting the opportunity to work to contribute to that universe was really cool for me. And besides that, it was okay. I mean, obviously the quality bar is very, very high that you need to meet, but it has been like that for other shows as well. Yeah, I don't know. It's more like just the stuff that you work on that you might be more excited and like I know how characters should behave or how stuff should be, like being more invested and pouring more of your own heart into it. but besides that, just technically, I think it was similar to all the or to a lot of other high quality shows.
Was this show recorded with anamorphic lenses or spherical lenses? I'm curious. I mean, I don't think that's a big secret, is it? Like, because I'm seeing like an
I don't think
anamorphic frame, and I'm seeing an anamorphic bend here. You know what I mean? I could be wrong on that.
I think most of the stuff that I've worked on was recorded with anamorphic lenses.
Oh, okay, like 2:1. And do you remember what camera they were using? Like, was it an Alexa or a Red? Was it like a? I'm trying to remember.
I'm not totally sure, but probably we could find it in some BTS stuff.
Okay, gotcha. I won't go into. I so want to know so much more about this movie, but I know we can't talk about.
Yeah,
there's so many cool things to talk about, the stagecraft and all that, and all of the really awesome work that's done on it, and yet it's just like, I know they have to keep a tight.
ILM is really going way ahead of a lot of competitors there and chartering new territory, which is super exciting. Those opportunities. And
how many post houses are working on the Mandalorian season 2? I mean, there was ILM. There's Important Looking Pirates, but is there more than that?
Yeah, there were more, but I would not be able to recall all of them. I think Image Engine was involved. I think Hybrid was involved. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of companies, but they are all like credited in the show, so it's pretty easy to look that up later.
Yeah, it's a beautiful show. I mean, it looks amazing.
Yeah. Or even on in articles like The Art of VFX, I think they usually say like which companies are working on that. So I guess that's a pretty good source to just look it up.
Cool. All right. Well, let's. Today we're obviously going through we spent a lot of time talking. Sorry, but I will have a link to Lucas's different plugins that he has to download. There's Dynamic Trigger, Look at 2D, and Mirror Position. Am I wrong on that? Or? So
yeah, and above that in the Gizmos folder is the FlareSuperStar and the actual demo that I'm gonna show later. So you just go one folder up.
Oh, there's just one folder up? Oh, there we go. Flares. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you guys will have this link at the bottom, and I'm assuming this stuff is also up on Nukepedia, if I'm not mistaken.
Some of it is. It's unfortunately not everything is up to date. So here on my GitHub, it will always be like the newest version, the latest and greatest.
And I'm also hearing people whine about the newest version of Nuke being Python 3 and scripts getting errored out. Are you having any experience with that, or have you heard about that?
I have heard about that, but it's mainly, I mean, yeah, that has been common knowledge for quite a while that Nuke 13 is going to be Python 3 and scripts need to get updated. I think there was some time for that, but I've played around a little bit with Nuke 13 at home with the non-commercial version, but I personally haven't used it in production yet.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are saying they're kind of being a little bit cautious right now because of the tools that are limited to it. But I do believe, and since you are part of the Nuke Survival Toolkit, Tony's, that's why this has been labeled Nuke Survival Kit 2. We also have the Nuke Survival Toolkit downloadable for you to use, and I believe Tony did say it was updated for 13. I could be wrong on that. So you might have to upgrade to his latest Nuke Survival Toolkit for it to work in Nuke 13 if you are. Otherwise, stick with 12 for now for the demos. And how about we take a pause here and we'll jump over to your computer? Is that cool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we've all, or most of us have probably been there, that the soup or the client or whoever asks you like this shot is great, it looks amazing, just put a flare in there and then we are done. And what are you going to do? The normal thing would be look up the library, search for some lens flares, find a cool element, just place it in there and it's done. But very often this doesn't really cut it, since you have maybe light sources in the shot or you have camera movement, and the flare element that you got that is behaving beautifully, but it's just not really reacting to your shot. So then you're stuck with, you have to recreate something from scratch to be able to put that into it. So let's just quickly go over what we have in Nuke with native tools. You can look up some references, whatever flare you want, like beautiful sun, star flares, or sometimes even more often, you don't want a huge sun flare particular, but more nice glints or whatever on your CG render. More stuff like this, where you get some reflections and you want them to pink and have some nice detail in there. So in Nuke natively, there is not so much actually you can do about that. You have the native flare tool, which looks like this. And if you open it up for the first time, it's a bit like, what am I supposed to do with this? But there are some great YouTube videos that this tool actually is quite powerful if you get to know it. But even there, if you wanted to try to match a star flare, you would need to get in and do this edge flattening thing, make it much bigger, do some sharper corners. Maybe I have here 8, and then you end up with something like this. But this is still not really, like, nothing close to cutting it and putting that into a shot to make it beautiful. The other thing is the glint tool to do some star flares, where you obviously need some form of input. So I just quickly painted a dot here. I made it bright, so I just multiplied it up that it would actually react to the glint. And then you get this procedurally, but still it looks very graphical, so you would need to do some basic glows or whatever to make it, and put a lot of work into this to get it to work, which sometimes can be hard. And usually you just want something that's quicker and just works. And as I said before, we are in this forensic, detail-oriented profession where you still need to meet your deadlines and work fast and smart, and you sometimes don't have the time to spend half a day or a day to really rebuild a nice flare and put that into your shot. So I had that problem a couple of years ago, and that's where I developed this FlareSuperStar Gizmo, which is the first tool that I'm going to show today, which out of the box gives you a more natural, nicer looking star flare. And I'm going to talk in detail about this tool and what you're capable of doing with it. So this is one thing. And usually what you would do after not being satisfied with that or not being able to recreate something quickly is you would revert and get some plug-in flares. Like some studios use optical flares from Video Copilot again, which is a great plugin. You can track the flares, place them wherever you want, have them move exactly the way you need it for your shot. And some of them even have some nice behavior, like when they go to the corner, to the edges, they flare up and they do some really cool things. They have nice pre-made elements and a lot of presets. But it's also quite known, like people know that plugin. If you want to recreate something, like match something, it still takes a lot of time to rebuild that because the presets obviously are not matching a plate flare that you kind of want for this specific show. And also you have some troubles with licensing. Like obviously it's an expensive plugin. It can have troubles running on the farm. It can have troubles like somebody else is opening up your script and they don't get a license and then everything errors out and they might not even be able to recreate what you did in your script, which could be potentially a huge problem if you work within a team. So that's why I wasn't really satisfied with using that, and I wanted to build something that kind of has the capability and matches the functionality that optical flares has. So I went ahead after doing FlareSuperStar, which was the first step, and got some more utility tools to actually build more nicer flares. I'm running this presentation, by the way, on my 6 years old laptop, so it's getting pretty slow here, but bear with me. Those are not super fast tools, but if you use them on a proper workstation, this should be okay. So here I have built a demo flare, which is just for demonstration purposes for today, so it's not the most complex flare, and this one has 3 keyframes. And I've pre-rendered the animation just to be able to show it, what it's doing. I hope you can, after this is cached, I hope you can actually see that smoothly on your end.
Mm. Yeah, it looks good. It looks beautiful.
Okay. I mean, again, this is not the most complex flare that anybody has ever done in, or seen in their life, but it's already giving you more than out-of-the-box Nuke stuff. And now we're getting into interesting territory. Let's just wait for it to be finally cached so that we see it move.
And it feels like an organic flare versus a digital flare. You know what I mean? It has
Exactly.
it has more of an organic feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we have this motion now, and remember, this has only 3 keyframes, but it's doing a lot of stuff, like it's flaring up at the edges. This little shape here is changing shape, and it's rotating, and everything is behaving. And yeah, this is giving you a lot of freedom and a lot of stuff that optical flares is giving you for free as well. We just place it somewhere, and the flare will do stuff in your shot and have nice behavior. So yeah, later on I will actually demonstrate how to build stuff like that and how to really be able to match flares that have been shot or have appeared in place, and it needs to get matched. So let's start with the building blocks, which are obviously FlareSuperStar. That one is in the Nuke Survival Toolkit. I think it's also an outdated version in the Nuke Survival Toolkit. So I'm running V1.2 here. And I think the Nuke Survival Toolkit still has the initial 1.0 release. So if Tony is watching that video by any chance, you got a pull request on your GitHub, or try to update it. Yeah, but let's talk about it. So I think that's also just to do a little detour here. The beautiful thing on GitHub is that you can collaborate, which you cannot really do on Wikipedia. You can just upload something there.
Yeah.
People can download it and they can comment. But on stuff like GitHub, the source code is available and everything, and you can actually pull that tool, change whatever you want, and create a pull request to the original author, and propose changes and propose updates and say, oh yeah, I have used your tool and it's great, but for me it was lacking that kind of feature, so I just implemented it. Maybe you like it and you want to include it in your upcoming releases.
Yeah, that's great.
Which I think is that's super great, and where GitHub is opening up a lot of nice possibilities.
We're seeing the democratization and freedom across all these different, education, sharing source code.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Education and collaboration, especially, like this is getting really cool possibilities there. So this is what you're getting when you're opening up FlareSuperStar. It's running in position mode, so you have a center point which you can hook up to a tracker or whatever to track it to your light source in the scene. And I mean, right off the box, it looks nice and interesting. And one of the cool things here is internally, it's using a lot of expressions. And I'm not going into detail how those expressions work. I mean, you have had a great talk by Andrea Jeremiah a couple of weeks ago, I think, where he went through a lot of expressions. And it's basically, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, God bless his soul for that one. Going through all that fun.
Yeah, but I mean, you can learn a lot. And so this is actually running through the whole bounding box of your image. So if you expose up, you're actually getting data everywhere. which is quite interesting and quite cool. It's not contained like the Nuke native flare, which is just a circle. This already gives you an exponential glow. It gives you all those star rays. And that means it also works off screen, which can be pretty cool if you just want some flares off screen, or a light source is off screen and should flare up the image a little bit. And you can move that wherever you want and still get data inside your image. Also, if you have overscan, like a bigger bounding box, that's all working fine. So let's go through some of the controls here. Just a quick overview of it. Obviously, an intensity control, which is just what it's saying, boosting it up. Gamma control, same thing. I created it initially, it's white, because I wanted to give the user as much flexibility as possible. So you usually want to get a grade node or whatever underneath and make it some nice color. To get more interesting looks, but that's not, I mean, you can do it here in the intensity control as well, but I like to do it exposed outside with some grade nodes. You have a scale here, which is making it bigger, smaller. There is a radius control, which is not doing anything at the moment. I'll come back later to that a bit later. It's more a legacy control that I had while I was developing it. Yeah, and then you get into more specific looks here, like the number of rays, where you can just choose how many star rays.
Now, when you're like handed a shot from, say, some major show, are you given any reference in regards to flares, or is it just like, hey, I mean, obviously the whole, what is a flare? A flare is the overexposure by a certain number of f-stops through the elements bouncing around inside a lens. So hence that lens has a specific character of a flare. Whenever you start a show, do they have a flare reference they give you, or do you guys just make your own flares, or or do you have like a reference library to say, yeah, they use this line of lenses, let's stick with this flare style?
That totally depends on the show. So some shows actually provide you with, like here we have shot some flare plates. This is what our lenses do. Please match that. Some shows don't care at all, and they don't want or need accurate flares. They just want some stuff going on. So yeah, it totally depends on the project, and also like on the team you're working on, the time frame. Like, do we have the time to actually match proper flaring, or do we want something quick that's doing stuff? And yeah, even like going, I mean, I guess most studios have some kind of library over productions and some elements they maybe even shot themselves for whatever purpose, that they can just reference and take. For certain types of lenses, as you said, you have sphericals, you have anamorphic. They obviously look very different and behave very differently. Yeah, so continue here. The number of rays, and then there is an odd ray length control that I implemented since the Nuke native glint tool has an odd ray length control, which just gives you the possibility to change like every other ray in its length. And in this case, it's not really changing its length. It's more a gamma control, a gamma adjustment just on those rays. So still, if I expose up, it's still influencing the whole frame, just now in a different intensity, which obviously creates the visual aesthetics of being smaller.
Could the implementation of flares be one of the arguments for obviously fully degraining your image, putting in the flare, and then fully regraining your image, as opposed to just graining the areas of CG, because there's such a fall off in a flare, and to incorporate the grain equally would be a nightmare. If you do it just only parts that are CG will have grain,
Yeah, if you want to be really accurate about it, I think there is almost no other way around than removing all the grain and re-adding all the grain and doing all your compositing in between.
So if the guy who invented Neat Video were to put his price up to $10,000, we'd all be in trouble, right?
Yes, probably.
Just saying. Go ahead. I'm sorry for
maybe
detracting
there will be a proper. Yeah, there might be a proper AI degrain tool at some point. Who knows what the future holds? So, and this part with the ray controls is where it's starting to get interesting. Again, we have some controls just over the rays with intensity and gamma. And then we can change the thickness of them here. We can change some of the softness, make them harder or softer. So you might start to see that you can create a lot of different looks with that. You can change the cone angle, make them smaller or spread further. And we are still just in the realm of the basic functionality of all those things. And then I have this spread controls, and that's kind of an interesting feature. Let me just reset all of those values. Oh, wait, that's how it should be. This spread thing, you usually have in a lot of references those rays diverge, and that's again something that the Nuke native glint tool doesn't give you. If I quickly move back over here, those lines are pretty parallel, and there is no way to change that in the glint tool, which causes some trouble. So you're not really able to match those nice and organic-looking flares that you see in a lot of plates. So this gives you that possibility. And with the spread controls down there, you can even go more crazy because now they are diverging all the way out for a while. And with this, I'm able to spread them at a certain point even more. So the rays are going up to this point, and then they're spreading out even further. So you can create those beautiful flower shapes if you wanted to. Or even go the other direction and make them almost parallel, like the glint tool does, because if you like that look, or need to match that look. Again, some controls over thickness, some controls over the fall off, and of course the spread distance, like where is the point where it actually starts to spread. You can move that further in, further out, and have all the control that you need.
And these are all aspects that when you created the tool, you knew as the options to be able to replicate a flare coming from stock or from the plates, the flare plates, the studio or the companies your clients you'd work for. They would give you these things, and you can just sit there and put a flare next to a flare and go, okay, I'm just changing all these variables, and I'm getting that anamorphic flare, I'm getting that spherical flare, and you can just with these controls alone. Do you have to double up a bunch of flares, or do you just use one single FlareSuperStar node to create the one flare that you usually get from a reference plate?
The one flare to rule them all. Usually you have to stack quite a lot of them, not just the FlareSuperStar, and I'm getting more into this when I'm getting into the demo flare and show some of the concepts there. It's all about stacking up multiple elements. Like I'm using FlareSuperStar, I'm using the Nuke native flare quite a lot as well, because you can create a lot of cool shapes with it. So yeah, it's usually not the one size fits it all approach, especially if you really need to recreate a look. So this is there to give you a very fast starting point. And then obviously you need to know how far do you need to go with that shot with the effect you need. yeah, it always depends on the shot, on the specific thing you need to do. So I'm quickly go ahead with the stuff here. So we went through the spread controls. Here I have some quick checkboxes to enable or disable the glow that we have, or the glare, which is those. Not sure how well you can actually see that stuff on your end, but here we have some nice streaks inside. Or if I disable the rays completely, you have this nice glare streaks that also look quite organic, and you could quickly disable it here. But now I'm also getting more into controls for that. So I'm having on a different tab here, controls for the glare. Again, intensity and gamma, quite self-explanatory, I think. And here we got those detail stuff, which is, just to quickly explain it, the first detail here, now we're working on the glare, obviously, gives you more of those streaks. So you can control how many of them do you want there, again, to match the look of a specific flare that you might have. And the second detail stuff here gives you those more organic shapes to kind of break it up, so that you're not only getting streaks again that you're already getting with the rays, you're getting some more interesting stuff going on there. And if you go really crazy on those values, you get some amazing, interesting shapes that might be hard to replicate in another way. But you can already see that this is looking kind of organic, and you get some interesting things. There are also two speed controls. One is the shimmer speed. Shimmer is a thing that optical flares, for example, has, that this noise pattern just changes over time. So if I go through the timeline here, this stuff will change just over time, and it will slowly morph and do some stuff, which is actually not what's happening with real-world flares. I just implemented that stuff here because, again, some plugins like optical flares have it, and some people are used to it.
Oh, it's like kind of like a fanboy favorite, you know.
Exactly, and it can give you some interesting looks because you get some organic behavior just over time. And the second thing here is the position change speed, and that's basically the same thing, but it's not going over time in the timeline. It's reading the position on the screen. So if you move it, I might need to go a little bit smaller here again so that we actually see it. If I move that flare around, those shapes will be different for every position. And that's something that's actually happening on lenses. If the light source moves, that some of those glares change because now the light is hitting different elements of the lenses, different angles, and I mean, flares are crazy. They do all kind of interesting stuff.
Well, I always think of the half moon flares from like, you know, it's like a half moon flare, and the moon goes from half moon to full moon anamorphically as the camera pans with the flare in the shot. And that stuff can get, I guess that stuff must be fun too when you're mimicking anamorphic flares, and you got to have that half moon morph from it moving from left to right on the frame, you know.
Totally. That's some very interesting behavior to try to recreate, especially procedurally, or like here, just with positions. I'm going to get into that a little bit later on. But yeah, what I did when I had to match some of those kind of behaviors is I would match. It was a spherical lens, so I had a spherical element, but it would do exactly that, going from like a half moon to a full moon, and it would morph. So I had it cut with a different, larger flare elements, and they would move against each other, and one was stenciling the other, that you would get this half moon cut. And that's determined by the shape of the aperture. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff if you start researching it and go down that rabbit hole, like how do flares actually work physically inside a lens. So yeah, those are glare controls, and then I have this glow controls here, pretty self-explanatory again, just the intensity of this glow in the middle, and the gamma as well, just in case you need to change that.
So that's just multiplication and gamma.
Exactly. It's basically just a grade node inside the tool that's doing that. And then if I enable the raise again, I have this last tab here, the fall off to 0. That's an interesting thing, which might not really get apparent in the right away. What it does. So it's disabled by default in position mode, and we are still in position mode. I'm demonstrating the other things later. But if I enable that, now we are cutting the flare somewhere. So it's not flaring up the whole image anymore, as it did before. We actually have a border now where it's definitely outside of that area. It will be 0, always, in case you want to control the shape. And this is where this radius controls now comes in, because it determines how big where this fall off will end.
Now, in a practical application for that, when do you find yourself using that sort of on-off?
It's mainly if I want to recreate more specific elements of a lens flare, like not the core star flare that you might have on a light source, but more of the ghosts that are happening, as you said, in the reflections of the lens, gotcha. Light bouncing internally.
So as you're stacking flares, you're like, I want to isolate one of those stacks to not be so blah, but I want that sort of exactly. Signature shape. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And it's going to be very important in convolve mode, which I'm going to get into now and continue there. So this is all nice. Again, you have the position. You can place it wherever you want, and you can hook it up to a tracker. But sometimes that you don't want to hand place every flare, and you just want something on the image very quickly, like glow, stuff that you just apply on the whole 3D render that you're getting to make it more photographic. And you can use FlareSuperStar to do that as well. And I've prepared a little demo scene down here. I just quickly downloaded HDRI from HDRI Haven. And I put it on a sphere, and I have another sphere with a reflective material and a ray renderer in Nuke, so that I get a nice chrome ball render where this HDRI is getting reflected. So I can rotate the big sphere around here, and you see the sun is going to move and do some stuff. So this is more likely what you're getting from a 3D render, right? You're getting a chrome car in that case, just to make it simple. And you're getting all those beautiful reflections, but now you want to glow or flare it. And this is where, again, where you can use FlareSuperStar. And yeah, I asked a good friend of mine at Mackevision, and he said, I might not be, it's a quote from him, I might not be the greatest guy to do tools, but he did some amazing tools as well. But I think I'm one of the best guys in naming tools. And I agree. He did a lot of great tools, and they all have great names. So while I was developing this, I went up to him and said, you know, I'm working on this glint tool that you could kind of use for flares, star flares. So have you some kind of funny name, cool name for that might stick? And he said, oh, yeah, let me think about it. And then he came back to me a couple of days later and said, yeah, I thought about it. FlareSuperStar might be a good name. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So let me show what this can do. You have your beautiful 3D render here, and you hook this up. And again, this is just the basic stuff, so I haven't changed any shapes there. This is what you get in the default. And we set this to convolve now. And what it's doing internally now, it's creating a kernel of that shape that you created, and it's feeding that into a convolve in Nuke already, and it's taking the image input and convolving that with your kernel. So you're getting flares spawned on the spots. And that's also the reason why it's developed in white, because now it's picking up the colors of the HDRI or whatever sections in your renders are.
Which technically that's what a lens flare is. It's an overexposure by a certain amount of stops, and I don't know if it was like 9 or 11 stops or whatever, but that's equated here by a high dynamic range readout of that little white spot reading in the values between 10 and 20, I'm assuming.
Exactly. So here we are getting super high values. If I zoom in, let's see, I think we're, almost 4,000. So really high sun values, which you would expect if you're working on a high dynamic range show. And I'm also, small disclaimer, I changed the color space of my project to ACES sRGB, and it's not the default sRGB. So that's more a nicer fall off. Let me just quickly demonstrate what that would look in normal Nuke's sRGB, which is...
So everything's going over to ACES, right? That's that?
Kind of. So this is there that you would get with your iPhone, which is just overexposed in the middle. But most cinematic cameras have some nice color profile. They film in log or whatever, and you're getting high dynamic range images in production. So this was developed in a production environment and for production users. So that's also why I am using for this demo here. You can obviously use your custom OCIO configs from the studios or whatever for the shows. But yeah, it has a nicer fall off on the glows. So, but yeah, if some of you guys download that tool at home and just load it natively into Nuke, it might look a lot harsher because you're in native sRGB. So let me quickly comp that over, and flares always should be plus, but I'm not outputting any alpha on purpose. So even if you just over it, it will be a plus. And then you're getting this right off the box. And again, this is just default values, but you're already getting a nice star glint on your highlights. So if you have nice speculars moving on a CG object because the object is moving and the camera is moving or light sources are moving, this will follow. I can also demonstrate it if I move the sphere here again, and just I might set the resolution down a little bit that it's just for the demonstration purposes that it will load. I'm getting some bad values, but I guess this is because I'm super low res now. But yeah, if I move around the sphere now, I'm moving the huge sphere where the HDRI is on. You see that the star glint is moving with it. So this is giving you something super quickly right out of the box. Some very nice results. And
now the thing with Video Copilot, they love that because it can take the alpha matte and for obstructing objects in foreground, block the lens flare or lessen it as the character moves in front of the flare. So that's like a quick and it's the speediness of Video Copilot that makes it so desirable, or just everyone's so used to the presets in there? Is that why everyone's like, oh, I love Video Copilot?
I think it's those two things. It has a lot of great features. Like as you said, with it's taking alphas if something passes in front of it to occlude that. And yeah, it has a lot of great presets, and I think the presets are the strongest selling point actually, because that's something it just takes a lot of time to build flares. So I guess that's one of the real main benefits.
Do you know of any studio that has a guy that just does flares, or?
Well, not just, but let's put it that way. ILP has me, so and that's actually a thing. Like for upcoming shows, or if a show is upcoming, from time to time, I would sit with the comp soup and discuss this. Like, is this a show where or the comp soup would come to me if they know that I'm into this kind of stuff, and they know the kind of tools that I've been doing. And they would come up and say, okay, this is going to be a show where we will use a lot of flares, and we might even got some production references. So can we spend a couple of days in the beginning and match those flares and build tools that match those flares for later on to use in the show? So just playing around with that example a little bit. I'm trying to get the sun to be more at the corner, at the edge, just to show another nice case. Because now we are only getting one distinguished spot that's very prominent. But if it moves more to the edge, which for some reason it won't really do now. This is interesting. I was testing that before. Why is the behavior the behavior changing now? Or maybe let's just use the other example, because now we have a nice little spot. But if this gets actually bigger, like spread out, because most of the times you have more diffuse or longer glints and not really one spot, then this also works and it spreads out nicely and it creates more of a nice overall glow instead of one special star. I'm just quickly going to switch the HDRI to a night scene where I have more lights inside of it, just to see what this is giving us. So here now we have a lot of light sources, and I'm only using 1K HDRI, so the background is obviously getting super shitty resolutions. But yeah, here we are getting nice star flares around all the light sources again. And as I said before, since it's white internally, it's picking up the color of the light sources. So here they are blue, here they are more reddish purple. And since it's taking everything into account and ray renderer also outputs the background, I'm also getting flares around the actual light in the background. And since this is doing a convolve, I'm now kind of getting into that territory that the nice stuff that you have with Video Copilot, where stuff can get occluded by masks, because this is what's happening here now as well. If the light source moves behind the, let's go the other direction maybe, easier. Here's what I meant. You get some nice highlights on the edge, and this is more of a glow. You don't get a star flare there. And now if the initial light source moves behind an object that's occluding it, in that case, the chrome ball that I have in the scene, you see on that light source down here that the flare is doing exactly what you want it to do, like it disappears behind the ball and it's growing bigger and getting fainter with the light intensity that's being occluded. So it behaves very organically, and you can create just nice glows. And if you get, so that's what I'm usually used it for. I think I use this mode in almost 50% of my shots that I'm working on, and I just throw it in there into the script, set it to convolve, and see what I get. And if you have huge surfaces that are bright, you're just getting nice glows out of that tool. But sometimes then you get those nice little pings in some CG renders here and there because you get you catch a sun reflection, and then you get some nice star shapes that would appear, disappear, like whatever the plate is doing or the render is doing.
And that's in a sense that's specularity, and specularity is the unsung hero of photorealism. You know, when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's doing a lot of stuff. And again, you have all the controls that we previously discussed, so you can change, higher number of rays, whatever, to just shape that the way you want. If you see something like that happening in your plate, you can try to match that behavior. It won't give you more of those ghosts, like those diagonal shapes that are reflections inside the lens when the light is bouncing around. You're not getting that out of the box. So this is something you'd need to treat separately. But for many of those highlight pings and glints, you actually don't need that. It's just fine if a CG spaceship or whatever is moving through the frame and it catches a sun reflection and it just pings up somewhere and you're getting that kind of stuff. That usually already adds a lot to your shot. And here I can demonstrate again why this fall off to 0 tab is important, because by default it's enabled in convolve mode. So if I expose here up, you see everything is nice, but if I would disable that, I would get very ugly rectangular shapes here. And this is due to, if I quickly set that to, that's the third mode I have, the output kernel. So this is the kernel that it's generating internally.
Oh, okay.
You can output it and access it.
Oh, that's cool.
Also, you want to, yeah, because maybe you want to stack multiple Flare Superstars here to create more complex shapes that you can with only one copy. Especially, I mean, I have rotation here, for example. So if I set that down, this is still looking very symmetrical, and you can rotate that a little bit around. But if you were to use, I mean, I don't know, maybe just even 2.
So when you were discussing stacking up multiple flares, it's not just multiple flares you're stacking up. You're also doing a profile silhouette establishment of stacking up a series of flares that is your kernel. Am I wrong on that, or?
Exactly. In that case, for at least. I mean, here you could, let me just copy a second Flare Superstar here that I set to a different rotation. Where was it here? And maybe disable the glare and the glow in this one because I only want the rays. And now you could merge them together and plus them.
Okay, cool. And then you feed that into the kernel of another superstar? Or
you cannot really feed it into that, so you would need to create a convolve. So now you get more interesting shapes here. So now you would need to create a convolve.
Okay, I gotcha.
And just use that as the filter input, put the image input back there.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's basically the exact same process that's happening internally in the Flare Superstar. So inside the group, there's just a convolve that is doing exactly that, taking the image input and convolving it around, which is, I included that in the group so that you're able to just use that tool on its own very fast. I mean, we all want to skip repetitive steps so that you don't need to recreate a convolve every time. You just take that, set it to convolve mode, and everything is set up for you already, and you're getting that.
So at a major studio, you have a plethora of artists that are technically characters in a Dungeons and Dragon game where it's like this person's got the powers of flaring. Like you got an expert in each person. Like I'm going to go to Lukas because he's the flare guy, and we're going to discuss this with him. And
kind of. That's at least that's what my experience has been. That of course, compositing supervisors and even VFX supervisors, they would kind of try to tailor to specific strengths when they do shot assignments. Like, okay, this shot has those kind of problems, and we know that guy knows how to solve those problems. Can be whatever. I mean, flares would, that's an example where I might come in handy, but a lot of different things as well. I mean, you might have, I don't know, people who have a lot of experience with deep compositing. So if you have a show or a shot that needs deep stuff, then you would go into that and talk to people. At least, I mean, not necessarily assign it to them, but what for sure happens inside a company is just that if you as an artist are struggling with a certain task, and you point out to your lead or your comp soup like, oh yeah, I'm struggling, I'm not really sure how to solve it, and they would point you to another guy and say, oh yeah, on another project 2 years ago, that guy had a similar problem, so let's just walk over there and ask him what the solution was.
Except in our cases, it's let's Zoom with that person.
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays, it's go on a Hangout or a Zoom call or whatever. So just to go back to this fall of the zero thing, here we are seeing what it does. In convolve mode, I make sure that it's getting to zero at the edge of the frame, which is what gives you the nice output on the light sources. And if I disable that fall of the zero again, now it kind of flares up the whole bounding box again. And that's the reason why you're getting this unnatural, ugly-looking rectangular boxes. So that's the reason. By default, it's on, so everything will work. You don't want it in position mode, and you would want it in convolve mode. So it gives you that behavior right out of the box, but of course you can change it if for whatever reason you need to art direct and design and go into more specifics there.
So basically, when the mode is set to convolve, it's as if you just put a convolve node after that.
Exactly. It's if you would put that set that to output kernel and put a convolve node after that and hook it up. It's a little bit more because it grades it a little bit down. I think if you, let's just do it for demonstration purposes here. So I set this to output kernel, create a convolve here, hook the filter up. I think this is getting super, super bright now. And it will take time because as you see, I don't even have a GPU on my laptop. Yeah, so this is getting super, super, super bright. And I think you need to grade it down quite substantially. Like, oh, wait.
You know, it's just kind of looking at all the complexity of just creating a simple flare and thinking back how you yourself are a Padawan learner of Andrew Kramer and lightsaber battles. How many people who did lightsaber battles eventually became a professional compositor? And a lot of the reason being is this stuff is so meticulous to the average Joe that wants to go play video games for most of their life. They would assume it to be oddly boring or just too technical. But that's why you really only learn this stuff if you're kind of forced to do that in production. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of true.
I mean, I can't get anybody excited about making flares, you know. Let's have a flare party, you know. It's something that...
Yeah, it's more like, you have to face that issue, and then, you want to get into it.
And the only way you can face it is if you're actually getting paid, or there's a benefit in you doing it. Because you can have a love for flares, but I don't think everyone has like a compassion for flare. You know what I mean? Like it's a technical thing we have to work out. You know. And
totally, that's totally true, and that's kind of where my engineering background also comes in. Like I do like those technical things, and I do like to think about like very like physical ways of what is actually happening and how can we mimic that, and what's the, if stuff is happening in physics, there are math formulas somewhere out in the internet that describe that behavior. So now I might get into nerd territory, but I would from time to time look up those kind of things and try, okay, here is the math equation for a certain effect. How can I translate that into a Nuke tool that I get correct behavior? And that's... I like doing that. So
I'm actually learning to be and have an engineer mindset. I'm surrounded by a bunch of engineers at an engineering school, and I have to do my thesis and all this. I have to do research, and it's so strange because it's a highly scientific environment. All my friends are like PhDs of aerospace engineering, and they're sort of like, here's what you got to do for your thesis and all this, and I'm like, it's forcing me not to be a lazy artist, which is rather interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's it's a good mindset to have. Like, and we talked about this previously. Like all those really old schoolers from ILM, they were kind of doing that when they were figuring out how to build a motion control rig. Those were engineers, and they were starting to do movies, and they were using their engineering background to create stuff that we would later see on screen. And like, how can we solve that technically? Obviously, back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, they had to do that even in an analog way, which is much more harder, or not necessarily harder, but we have more tools and that help us figure out all those technical hurdles. Like
I forgot the name of the VFX supervisor at ILM, but they just released at ILM's YouTube channel. They just did a whole video on how they did the motion control system work for Mandalorian Season 2. And I forgot the name of the VFX supervisor on there, but he's in there with an old wood shop with his apron, and he's over there, machining these materials again. And I'm thinking, wow, that's so inspirational. Like that's what it really means to be an artist. It's artistry and science, together.
Exactly. Like that's how I like to view it. I mean, there is this typical question that people get asked on interviews, like, are you a technical artist or a creative artist? And my understanding is that it's kind of that difference. Like, I think I'm more on the technical side because I like to think of it like this is a physical problem, this is a mathematical equation somewhere, and we need to make this work technically. And then there are very creative people that might not come from, oh yeah, if that would happen in the real world, the physics behind it would be like this. No, they just have this enormous creative output, and they're like great in just putting beautiful images together that just feels right. And of course, those are just two very extremes, and everybody falls somewhere on that line. But yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. So yeah, here to demonstrate, this is now what you're getting with the convolve. It's just important with the convolve that you enable use input channels, because if that's disabled, it's only using this one channel that's specified here. And we want to use all channels, obviously, that are coming in RGB. Exactly. So this is how you can use FlareSuperStar in a very fast and procedural way, but you still get a lot of very nice looking flares for cheap and super fast. Okay, and that kind of concludes the FlareSuperStar, but oftentimes this procedural approach that we are having here at the moment is not enough, or is not giving you enough results. You really want a specific light source like the sun or the engine of a spaceship or the headlight on a car, whatever it might be, and you want to track that into position, and you want all this nice ghosts inside the lens and much more stuff that's happening. So this is where we are going up to that bad boy here, where we are actually talking about building flare tools. And again, I've quickly showed that before, like it's moving and it's doing all nice organic things. I'm just gonna copy that over here so that I can demonstrate it, kill the animation. And again, set the quality down so that it loads a little bit quicker. So you can move that one around, and all those shapes change position. They do some nice stuff. We have, now that we are getting towards the edge, we get some vignetting here. We get, it's nicely flaring up, so it's actually getting stronger. We are getting this glare that is coming in here. Yeah, I'm just quickly gonna preview this again.
So we're looking at a FlareSuperStar that you built. Am I wrong on that, or what's the demo Flare? Is that another plugin, or?
Yeah, that would be more like a plugin. It uses FlareSuperStar internally. So FlareSuperStar is more like a tool that you would use to create plugins or actual effects that you want to see at the end. And I'm going to demonstrate some of those things. Let me quickly jump. So yeah, we want to, here you see all those nice dynamic behaviors. So we have some vignetting going on. We have the flare that is changing a little bit of its shape. It's changing its intensity based on its position. When it goes to the edge, which is what a lot of flares do, they flare up and glow up a little bit stronger at the edge before they disappear completely. We have this little rainbow thing here that's changing shape when it's moving and also intensity, and it's rotating around and doing all kind of interesting things. It's kind of starting out like as this triangle, and the further we go to the edge, it's growing bigger and bigger until it folds back into itself again. And this is more the kind of stuff that we see in actual flares. Like a lot of elements are doing crazy things all at once, and this is also what gives this natural and organic feel to flares, that all of those things are doing some stuff. And to demonstrate it again with FlareSuperStar, how you can build a lot of those elements. So obviously here we have a star flare as the source, which could be the sun or whatever. But if I go here and if you go crazy again on some of those settings, like let me disable both of those, set this to 1. Here you're getting some interesting shapes that you can rotate around, and with the cone angle you can make them bigger, smaller, and now also this spread distance and spread contours, they come back, and with them you can create some really interesting things like this, and with the rotation you can rotate it around, you can move it. Here again, the fall of the zero might come in handy if you want to control more of it. So FlareSuperStar is more like a building block that gives you the opportunity to create a lot of shapes, and then it's up to you, to the artist, to make something with those shapes. You get the convolve mode, which gives you a lot of procedural. Here you have some star flares that are just doing nice things without you having to do anything. But if you really have to match a flare, like the supervisor says, we have that specific flare and I want exactly this flare that we shot in your car shot, and it should follow the headlights perfectly with the animation that we got from the animation department, behaving as it should. When the car enters the frame, it should flare up at the side. And now you can go in and start recreating those flares and building these elements one by one. And then you go to the edge and it's not doing anything and it's not rotating. So you can go through the shot and you can animate all those parameters by yourself. And the flaring at the edge, like you can create a keyframe here and make the intensity much stronger.
So that's hand key animating all those micro elements that make up the full flare. You don't have that physically attached to the rotation. That's you hand keying the offshoot of the line that's coming from the flare, and you're positioning that thing to match up each individual frame, at least a couple frames of animation, to look like it's one cohesive directional output, right?
Exactly. And as you can assume already, this is a lot of tedious work, and people hate doing that because you're doing so many small elements, and to make it feel organic, you really have to put in time and animate all those elements individually, and then you put it into dailies, And discussions start with the supervisor, like, I'm not sure, should it flare up faster at the edge? Like, when it's moving there, shouldn't that animation curve be faster? And then you get into iterations, and now you're happy with something, and then animation changes, and you have to do it all over again. So that's not what we want.
But that's
like,
not
at all.
lightsabers, man. You were supposed to show us some lightsabers today. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to show you now, because this is what that is doing. So now we are getting into the really interesting stuff. Here, I'm not animating anything by hand. I only have the position control. And now you see you have this, let me expose up a little bit so that you guys can see it better. We have this glare at the edge, and it's glowing up and doing a lot. And now if I move it further inside the frame, the purple glare is gone and the edge glow is gone. We still have some vignetting, but it's behaving differently now. Now it's super bright. If I move that closer to the center, it starts to fade off. This little guy here, which is rotating and changing its shape, I'm not doing anything by hand here, animating. I'm just switching the position of this one guy. So this is what you want to have in your show. You want to have something that is already matched to the flare, to a flare that you have in your library or whatever. But now you can put in a tracker and art direct it and just move it through the frame, and all the elements behave as they should behave, according to the certain position. So I like, on a show, that's what I talked about previously, when the comp soup would come up to me and say, okay, so now we have this show, we're going to have a lot of flares, we need to art direct them, we need to be able to move them around, to accumulate, to match camera movement, to match animations. These are reference flares, so we know how they behave with certain movements. Can we now build plugins that match that behavior? And this is where I would come in and say, okay, yeah, I sit down for a day or two, and I'm going to do all those elements and match them up. And I'm going to show some smaller tools that will help you with those behaviors automatically to build a plugin. And this is just a demonstration of this workflow, how to build a plugin flare. And this is very simple. This is a very, very simple flare. So usually it would be would include much more. But here we can start a discussion, like what is actually happening. We have some elements moving over there. They are kind of reacting to the position and are just mirroring the X position. We have all those diagonal ghosts. They are, I'm going to show them later, they are just the Nuke flare tool. But usually I'm actually matching all of those elements one by one, but I'm getting into that a little bit later. And we have this rainbow guy here.
I'm holding back my questions because I know you're about to answer them.
Yeah, you can also shoot them right away. But yeah, and we have this rainbow guy, which is changing from almost being like a circle around a black shape. And if we're going closer to the center here, this circle disappears and we only have a cone. And this is, again, all created procedurally. So this is what we want to give the artist. Here is a tool, a flare. It's looking nicely. And that's also what optical flares give you. If you open it up and you load a preset, you get something like this. You can hook up a tracker to the position. And all the shapes move. It's flaring up at the edges. It's doing nice
Well, see,
stuff.
now I have to apologize to ILM because I always bad rap them for having the same video copilot lens flare. But now seeing all the work involved, I can see why they're like, we got to get it done, buddy.
Exactly, because if you are getting like this comment, like just put a flare into that shot and then it's done, you see how much work there actually can be involved, and you don't want to spend this time late in production because you need to get that shot done in an hour or whatever it is in this day. So you revert back to plugins, and you cannot build all those elements from scratch because you're just lacking the time in production. That's why you go to presets or something that has been built previously. And that's why we now at some companies try to build those kind of flares early on in the show, so that we know, okay, when stuff gets stressful later on and we need to deliver stuff, we get into finals, we have those tools available. They're already pre-built, and artists, and also those creative artists that are not as technical, can just throw in this plugin that we built internally in this company and just do amazing, beautiful stuff with it very quickly.
Okay, so what you're discussing here with this demo flare is a tool set proprietary to or just specific to your company that you're working for, that takes all these single elements and sort of like links them up into the position node.
Kind of, but it's not just, I mean, yes, this demo flare is created for demonstration purposes for here, but yes, we have some of those flares that I have matched in the past for shows where actually exactly that use case. We got some plates of flares and I matched them element by element to be used in the show later on. I didn't come up with that idea. I actually got the idea by watching some of the VES making-offs or VES entries from, I think it was Veta Digital on Infinity War, where they showcased exactly that workflow, where they said, we got some elements from the client, those nice anamorphic lens flare plates, and we then recreated those flare elements that were shot with in-house tools so that we can art direct them and we can move them around. And I felt like, this is super smart. I want to do that as well and be able to match flares. So this is where this comes in. And now I'm going to show you what we need to be able to do that. Because it's not so hard, actually. If you were to animate all of those elements for each shot, this would accumulate to a lot of time that we don't want to spend in production. So we want to automate a lot of those things. And this is where this utilities MoGraph folder on my GitHub page comes in handy. So what we have here is we have one position knob, and we have all those elements reacting to that. The only thing I usually like to expose to some artists are some very basic controls over like the core intensity to be able to make the core stronger or brighter, some of the ghosts intensities to be able to, because we want to give some control.
So if you were doing Fast and Furious 50 and they gave you a reference of a specific car headlight flare, you would recreate that. You would dump this in the hands of the artist and say, here, you got these 3 different knobs that you can play with.
Exactly, kind of. I mean, it doesn't have to be free. Whatever is good for the show or for whatever you feel like you want to control that on a shot-by-shot basis. But everything else is just tied to the position knob. So there are 3 basic elements that we need to have to control those kind of behaviors. One is a position that we can hand place other elements that would read out whatever the position of the core flare is, and then place corresponding elements wherever on the screen you need them to be. Then we want the other element is we want them to be able to rotate forwards somewhere automatically. So you just have a position here, and you want them that whenever you change the position, that they kind of rotate. So you want a position variable that you can link later, and you want a rotation variable that you can link. And the third one, which is almost, for me at least, the most exciting one, is kind of a dynamic triggering that if you are at a certain position on the screen, like the edge, stuff happens. Like if I go to the edge of the screen and animate up the glow, if I move further down to the center, animate down the glow based on that position. that name, again, I got it from Video Copilot because that's how they call this thing in optical flares. It's dynamic triggering, which is basically if you move to the border, you can trigger some parameters on certain elements. Or if you go to the center, whatever. So this is what I have over here. Those are the free utility tools. And just to quickly demonstrate them, this is exactly the three things that I just pointed out. So here, the first one is called mirror position. And it does exactly what you would expect. You have an input position, and it gives you an output position that's just mirrored around the screen.
And it's not based on a specific resolution. It's based on, in the Python scripting, height and width and height, right?
Exactly. It's expression-based, so it's not Python-based.
Oh, yeah, expression-based, sorry.
Exactly. So much faster. But yeah, it's not based on the resolution, so you can have that resolution independent, and it would just mirror around. You can already see where this can come in handy for a lot of flare elements. And there are some controls up here. I'm going to demonstrate them. This is actually how you would use this mirror position. You would have a flare or whatever, maybe a FlareSuperStar, maybe a Nuke flare or some core element. And then you would link that position knob to the input position of the mirror position tool, and then you would get an output position that you would read. And you can hook that up to a transform, for example, so that you get this beautiful little thing here. So if I open up the flare tool again, maybe I should actually comp them together just to demonstrate that. So I have the flare position, and the checkerboard is moving and mirroring the position of my input flare. And just to quickly demonstrate the controls that I have here, I have the checkboxes for mirror X and Y. So if I disable that, it would actually just match the position of your core, of your initial light source. Then I have a static offset in X and Y, which is just static offset in X means wherever this flare goes, your element will be linked to that flare, to that core, with a certain offset that is static and it's not moving at all. Same goes in Y. It's just to art direct your positioning a little bit. And then you have this dynamic offset, which you can think of a scale around the center. So if I reduce that, you don't get the position just exactly in the mirror. You can, mirroring around the center, you can hand place them where you want your element to be. And now it's still moving dynamically, and it's respecting your input position of the initial flare. But yeah, you can place it, so if the scale is positive, it would move faster and faster outside
That's
of frame.
interesting. So it's like a multiplier of distance. It's not just a perfect offset. It's a multiplier of offset.
Exactly. And that's what you need, because if you rebuild a flare and has a lot of ghosts, you want to be able to place all those elements exactly where they should be, and also where they would move corresponding to your input, right? Yeah, so this is what mirror position gives you. Then I built this look at 2D tool, which is basically a transform node. So it gives you all the controls that you would expect in a normal transform. But additionally, it gives you this look at knob, and it would always rotate towards that look at. Yeah, so just to demonstrate it again, if I would hook up a checkerboard
Are these
that
tool
one.
sets inside of Nuke's Tony's tool set, or are they just, as far as I know,
I
Nukepedia
don't.
and your GitHub that we have linked below?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they're just on Wikipedia and my GitHub. Not even not all of them are on Nukepedia though. I think this look at 2D is. So let me just.
This sounds like a
quickly.
fun arts and crafts type deal. Like get some Flare footage and try to create it yourself. Use these, you know.
Yeah, I mean this exactly, and this can be can also be a challenge, like for artists or people that want to.
And then you just
train.
wrap it up into a gizmo, and then you say, "Look, I made a flare." You know.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's definitely something. So yeah, here again you have basically all the controls that you would normally have in the normal transform node, and you can move it around. But in addition, you have this look at knob, so that your input always rotates towards that. So you can either have it static, like in the center of the frame, and then you move that object, or you can have that one moving and your object reacting to it. The only addition here is that you have this rotation offset knob in my tool, because you want to also be able to just rotate that object on its own, to orientate it correct in its initial state, to orient it correctly in that initial state, so that it then follows around. And this can be useful for flares, but it can also be useful for all kinds of motion graphics, or if you need to do a head-up display for a certain whatever sci-fi show where they have helmets and all kind of crazy stuff going on, or even just car speed indicators that you need to animate in Nuke. It's not a hard task. You can do that with the normal transform node, but this might be a faster thing to just art direct it and to, because you can, again, hook this one up to a tracker or whatever to just have it follow your animation. So that's look at 2D, and we will go into all of them inside the demo flare. So I will go inside the group and show how I use those tools to build.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And the last one is this dynamic trigger, which I already scratched upon previously. So this dynamic trigger gets an input position again, and then it will output a value between 0 and 1, depending on the position on screen. And I have a center trigger and a border trigger. The border trigger, obviously, like if I go right to the border, then I would get a value of 1 for the border trigger, or around 1. And the same goes for the center. So if I move towards the center, then I get a value of 1 for the center and a value of 0 or almost 0 for the border.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
And yeah, and with that, you can already see where the power comes from. So you can link those knobs to a multiplier in a grade node. And now, like all those glows that will flare up at the edge, you can automatically have them glow up, flare up, and do a lot of behaviors with just that position on screen, which gives you a lot of freedom. And I have that with, this is a linear trigger, so it's just a linear interpolation of that distance.
Oh, wow, you got
but
two,
that's
huh?
usually not how, exactly, this is usually not how flares behave. They would have some kind of exponential curves. And that's what we have here, exponential triggers, where you can set the exponents of the curve that you want to have up here, again, for the center and the border. And I have a little expression node down here that visualizes.
Oh, wow, yeah, there you go.
That kind of thing, because sometimes it's hard to understand here. But now if I, you see the green one, if I just go to the green channel, is the exponential center trigger. And if I change that exponent, you see how the values change and how it would behave on screen. I don't use that for anything inside the tool, actually. It's just for me to kind of get
It's just a
very quick
visualization
visual,
of
exactly,
the
of
fall
how
off
will your
intensity or the curve of the intensity as you do it. And I'm assuming when you program this stuff, the position left and right is more flaring as it gets to the edge of the width or the width, or wait, no, is it the width and yeah, height? No, wait, not width, yeah. So it would be width getting closer to the edge, more intensity to the left, more intensity as it gets to the width on the right end edge, which again is resolution. It doesn't matter what resolution is, you're just using the expression word width and height, basically, I'm assuming. And then as it goes up and down,
exactly.
the Y, it's the same thing. As it gets closer to the edge, you get more exponential, and then it gets all down to the bottom frame, it's the same thing.
Exactly. And yeah, you can do a lot of useful stuff with that, because I mean, one obvious use case is again the glows at the edge. So those are the controls you get here. One more thing is this expand border distance, and just quickly touch on that, because very often flares don't have their maximum of the glow or whatever exactly at the edge of the frame. Sometimes it's a little bit outside of the frame. And this is where this comes in handy. So you can actually move wherever this will be one outside of the frame,
awesome.
And that distance to really art direct and get like, so now it will be one 20% outside of the frame. And again, you see that in the visualizer. You can also move that inside. If you go negative, that's not going to be visualized with that one, but it will work with those output sliders. So now I'm 20% in, so somewhere here I'm getting to 1, and if I move farther out, I'm getting back to 0, so I have a fall off outside as well. It's basically, it's a spike around wherever I define this edge to be.
And all this stuff gets driven into, obviously we're not using these radials at all, they're just simply, we're just using them as a representation of data, which we later finesse when we physically see the interactions of the actual flare data being driven into one parented position node, basically.
Exactly. This is just for us to kind of get an idea where it will be. And also it's sometimes easier that you don't want to move that around all the time to measure, like if you know here you want a certain value, you don't want to move that around all the time. It's sometimes easier to just look at those numbers down here in your viewer, which will be the same numbers, and just move your cursor position to measure some of those values and how it will behave to get a quick idea of how you're using those tools. So we are getting quite some advanced stuff here, but I think that's very, very interesting for yeah. But I thought this might even be interesting, very interesting for upcoming artists to learn how you can build those kind of tools that are really can become very high quality tools and very valuable for you, save you a lot of time in production, and even for a company if you're able to do those kind of stuff and share that with fellow artists. Because I mean, if one guy works 2 days to rebuild a flare and every other artist in the team can just use those flares on every shot they're working on, you get a lot of stuff done compared to every artist trying to rebuild flares on their own and doing some stuff looks better, some stuff looks worse, and you're just, as with everything, you try to put the least amount of work and the least amount of time into something to get it approved and get it to work. But here you can get more production value out of it if you spend some time early on in the show.
And you are part of the answer to what I critiqued on my previous video, which was the flares inside of the Mandalorian look so organic and real versus previous ILM projects that I have seen personally. That's my opinion. You don't have to share that opinion, but I'm just saying that's what I think, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, I cannot speak for every shot that is in the Mandalorian. Yeah, I mean, people are evolving, obviously. And now that you know how to build all of those kind of things here, or use them, you can start building your own flares, like I did with the demo flare, and I'm going to show how I set it up soon. And then build kind of a library of flares, because if you match 2 flares per show after a year or 2, you kind of have, I don't know, 10 flares in your company, and you just get stronger and stronger and stronger and have more presets to choose from. Because again, that's one of the other very strong sides of optical flares. It comes with a bunch of presets, and you don't want to think about everything. And yeah, if your show doesn't need a specific flare that needs to be matched, but you just want a sun flare to enhance that full HD shot you're working on, you just pick a flare that you built a year ago, and it all works, and you get a lot of nice-looking production value out of it. So to wrap this here up, again, with this dynamic trigger thing, we are getting a value between 0 and 1 for each position on screen, and even outside of the frame, off screen, like whatever it is, we are getting some values. And again, I've mentioned that a couple of times. The most obvious use case would be a glow at the edge. But since this is just a value between 0 and 1, you can use that to influence every parameter you have in Nuke on every node in every knob, which gives you a lot of power. You can influence scales of shapes. You can influence, I've shown the cone angle in FlareSuperStar previously. You can influence that it spreads up or gets wider if you go to the edge. It gets narrower if you go towards the center. You can automate a lot of cool behaviors in any tools. And I said I wouldn't go into many expressions since Andrea already did that, but there is one example I want to share, which is the lerp example. I only very recently learned about the lerp expression, and that's super powerful.
Anybody that's dealt with Unreal Engine will know what lerps are.
Yeah, I think everybody who has dealt with shader codes or something like that. So lerp stands for linear interpolation. And this is the expression down here for Nuke knobs. So you just write lerp, and then you have an argument of value A, value B, and an interpolation. So you can feed in whatever values, 2 values you want, and an interpolator, and it would linearly fade from one value to the other. So if the interpolator is 0, now the result is 2, because our value 1 is 2, our value B is 5. If I move that all the way up to 1, we're getting a value of 1 in that case, and everything in between depending on where this slider stands. And here, so now you can do, like in a transform, a scale knot, you can set, okay, my initial scale is 2, my end scale should be 5, whatever, and then you can use dynamic trigger to blend between those scales for each shape. And again, you probably can see where this might become very useful in flares, where you can do a lot of shape changes and stuff just triggered by the position on screen. So now we got through all this hard technical utility tools. So let's quickly jump into that again.
Down the rabbit hole we go.
Exactly. And I quickly show you what I'm doing inside of that tool. So we're almost done.
If you made it this far, you're a real artist.
Exactly. You're really into that kind of stuff. But I hope you might have learned 1 or 2 things about how to technically put stuff together. So this is the node graph of this demo flare. And you can download that from my GitHub or whatever and go through it on your own time, in your own pace, and try to trace all my steps. But I'm just quickly go through it. I disable the expression links just because then it doesn't look so intimidating.
That's like Control E or something. I forgot what that hotkey is. Is it?
It's Alt E. Yeah. Yeah, very useful. Alt-E
Green
disables all
line
the
crap.
clone expression. Yeah. So I usually just have one no-op node somewhere that has the position knob. That's basically just the master position out here. And this one, so this knob gets linked to all the Flare superstars and normal Nuke flares that we have in here, and to the dynamic triggers that we have over here, to the mirror positions, to all the nodes that we just discussed. They all get linked to just one hero position. And then I usually divide it into some steps. So we have the core pipe somewhere, which is building, if we go through this, this is using a Flare Superstar for the main core. It's using some grades to colorize it. It's actually using a Nuke glint to do this blue streak as well. I'll go back to faster speeds here. So yeah, this is doing this blue streak here. I have another Flare Superstar that is just doing some glows, because if you would use the Nuke glow node or even some exponential blur glows that gizmos that you might have, if you go outside of the bounding box, your source disappears. So your glow disappears, because if you're blurring an image, you need an image to blur, right? But if you go outside of the frame now, there is no source. But since we are only calculating pixel values based on the input position, we can still have nice glows that are outside of our bounding box, off screen somewhere. And this is something, again, that might be hard to achieve with some other tools. Yeah, so I'm building a core here. I'm building those lens ghosts, which are, let me just move the position back here again, which is Nuke's Flare tool that I just set up to be a multi-iris element, and I have two of them, and to do different things. Here I'm just using a rectangle with some of those mirror transition positions to place them and colorize them with grades, blur them a little bit to get some of those elements. And down here I have another Flare Superstar that's doing this crazy rainbow shape. And I'm quickly going to explain what this is doing later. Here I'm doing the vignette, which is just a radial, inverted, some grades to get a nice vignette up there. And then I'm using another expression to create a simple mask and look up 2D here to rotate that mask to the opposite direction of my input position. I'm going to explain why this is useful a little bit later, but that's how this is hooked up. So yeah, those usually are the main elements how I build up my flares. So I build the core first, and I try to match that. And then I go through those artifacts like this ghost or vignettes, and I just try to build them element by element. So let's start with some of those elements here, which are pretty simple. So here we have this multi-iris thing that comes out of the Nuke Flare tool, where I just hit one of those presets and one looked nice, linked it up to the initial position that we had to the master position up here. And then if I enable, yeah, I'm using a multiply node down here that is linked to one of those dynamic triggers to have it fade on and off with some behavior based on the screen position, that, as I showed previously. So this would be one very simple example already where the dynamic trigger is useful. Just link it to the value of a multiply knob to just get its intensity based on the on-screen position. So this element will, I think it's getting stronger the closer I get to the middle. Yes, and if I go closer outside of the to the border, it almost disappears completely.
So I'm assuming while you're in this, it's unprepackaged gizmo, you're bringing in read nodes of reference of, say, a headlight, and you're moving the position where the headlight's at and seeing, oh, it looks like it matches. Good. Or maybe I have to offset a little bit to the left, and maybe I got to make it a little more greener, maybe I got to change the intensity. And then you can bring in any plate shot, say, of a headlight of a car, of the reference, and you would go, wow, look at that, it matches each change of the, or what kind of leniency does production allow for not matching perfectly the lens flare of some plate shot that you have to,
Yeah, it really depends on the project, and it's always like up to this, like how close of a match does it need to be, and that's a time thing basically. I mean, do I get a week to build a flare, then it matches better. Do I get half a day, then it will just be a rough match. So that's always like, what do we need for this project, basically. But yeah, exactly. That's what I would do. I bring in a read node, and where a flare is moving, best case scenario, so that I get a bunch of positions, and then I would just go around in the viewer, match the position, whatever I'm seeing in the read node, and see that all the elements kind of match. And then I would go to another frame where the flare in the read node is in another frame, in another position, move the position over there and see what all my elements are doing, and kind of try to match that behavior. And I would do that element by element, so that I don't need to deal with all of them at once. I just look at, okay, this green dot, it appears, it disappears with this. And then it doesn't take so long. If you're just trying to track one element in a flare reference, it's usually not doing that many different things. And you get, okay, it's doing this combination of 2 or 3 parameters, and then you're just matching that up, takes you 20 minutes or something, and then you have that element nailed, and then you go to the next element.
So in the same way that Tony's keying template is what he starts with, do you start with this as your template and then swap things out? Or do you start it completely from scratch? Are you that type of guy where you want to reinvent the wheel each time? Or
No, it depends. I usually use some kind of template that I already did, because it's usually like this, for example. I mean, now I have a flare node that is already linked to the master position node, so it's much quicker to just copy that and then reset all the parameters to match the next element. And I usually already have some multiplies linked to dynamic triggers. So I have look at 2Ds that are already linked to certain parameters, all of those kind of things that are already done in one flare, I would just bring into another one. And then, so all the utility things I would usually keep, and then just scratch the actual element and rebuild that. Or, I mean, if you have something that's matching very closely from something you have done previously, bring it over. That's great, because, yeah, of course. That obviously depends on, so yeah.
How different are the two worlds between an anamorphic flare and a spherical flare? Is it drastically different in regards to the workflow?
Not so different. It's mainly the shape, and that anamorphic flares anamorphic lenses usually do crazier flares. So they have much more different stuff that is going on.
You've got the two elements of the anamorphic cylindrical portion mixing in with the craziness of the spherical element, and it's just like wackadoodle land, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me so far, matching spherical lens flares has been easier, but matching anamorphic stuff is also doable. It might, and then again, it's like, where do you stop at which level of complexity? If you get most of the elements to move right, and you just cannot nail this one very specific element in the upper right corner, just scratch it, because how many people will actually realize that on screen that
I don't know. They found that crew member.
In two different shots, yeah, that the element that it's missing this ring element or whatever it was in another shot. I would also do that, like if I have a flare and it's matched perfectly or very good to whatever I have, but for that shot that I'm working on, I don't like a specific element because it's just an ugly red dot or a red triangle, whatever. I would just go inside the group, find that element in this tree and disable it and say, nope, not in this shot, my friend, I don't like you. And so this is, again, I mean, you are still the artist doing the shot. So if you don't like certain behaviors or things inside that flare, then go inside and disable it and say, I don't want this element to be in this shot because it's messing up the framing or it's destroying the composition, whatever.
In your humble opinion, obviously you're doing a workflow here which would infer that Video Copilot, is there something missing in regards to artistically that you see in Video Copilot where you're like, you know what, we're gonna go in and make our own flares here because this plugin doesn't have X, Y, and Z that we need to have? Is there anything that you go, this is why we're doing this, as opposed to using Video Copilot?
I think the main reason really is licensing behavior sometimes, and usability, because optical flares, again, this is a new interface, it's a new plugin, you have to learn, right, if you want to use it. I mean, it has some simple controls, but if you really want to get into it and do stuff, you need to learn it. This is just all inside of Nuke. It's inside a group. It runs on your farm. It won't break anything. It's all internal nodes. And all of us Nuke compositors know Nuke, so we can kind of see what is going on. We can look under the hood. So that's more, optical flares for me is more like a black box that can give you amazing results. And this opens up the possibility to really go inside, see everything that's going on, and be able to art direct it and do more. So that's for me the main reason. Yeah.
So did you want to jump into Q&A right now, or did you have something else you wanted to demonstrate? Or am I don't
not really. That's exactly that's pretty much it. All of you feel free to go through that and see what kind of crazy things you can do if you link up some stuff. That one might be interesting, the rainbow element, where I linked a transform mask, which is just scaling the elements in different channels. So I have one transform that's just scaling the green channel, another transform that is just scaling the red channel, so that you can get really interesting behaviors. Something similar is happening up here with this edge glare.
Oh wow, man!
Yeah, this is one of the. So we have a dynamic trigger multiplier that is just moving up when it's getting close to the edge. I have, again, a transform mask here that's linked to the center position of this flare, and it's just rotated a little bit to get this chromatic shift on the white element. And then I'm using another FlareSuperStar in a pretty creative way here, because I have disabled inside this group the exponential fall-off. So I'm using that one as a mask to mask the glare here. And it's linked to rotation, so that this glare rotates towards the center. And it's also spreading out the closer you're getting to the border. So if you go further out, this cone will get bigger. So yeah, those are some of the very cool elements that you can create pretty easily. Some of the tools I just demonstrate.
All right, so we are back, and we're gonna look at some questions. Again, if you guys need the plugin, it's Flare's MoGraph Utilities demo here, linked at the bottom. And this is there's some of the gizmos and demo Flare and FlareSuperStar. So is this one you can actually dig into and get that big outline? Is that the template file, or?
Yes, exactly. That's the template Flare, the exact version that I just used here. So if you click on that one, just for a quick demonstration, you get like all the text code. If you just click on the demo Flare, and you could actually just copy paste the text directly into Nuke.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. It's a lot of lines, but I think if you you can just mark it all, Control A or something. And
how much of an overhaul is everybody going to have to do for this Python 3?
This has nothing to do with Python, actually. This is just the basic Nuke script language. So if you're inside Nuke and you hit Control C on any node and you paste that into a text editor, this is what you're getting.
That's what you get. Okay.
And you can paste that text back into a Nuke tree, a Nuke node graph, and you get back to the node.
Tells you what I know. So anyway, asking questions. We have Manoj Manoharan, Madlux VFX. Also, congratulations, Manoj, for moving to Canada. Getting closer. If you ever get in Indiana, give me a ring. We'll go out for coffee or something. What are some of your favorite gizmos other than yours? LOL.
That's an interesting question. What else am I using? I think the one that I'm using the most lately is Blacksmatch from Tony Lyons. That's a really amazing tool to match black levels. I guess, yeah, that's for sure also in the Nuke Survival Toolkit, and he has an awesome tutorial on YouTube about that. That is super, super handy, and I'm also using that on a lot of full-TG shots to just get more organic black points all over the shot.
Yeah, it's that interesting fall off between the values of 0 and like 0.3. Like you want to get the gradient matters sometimes, you know, the way that the interpolation of the curve, you know.
Totally. So that kind of stuff is super great. And yeah, I agree. Like you have a lot of controls over black points with that one. I think the second most used gizmo would be the camera shake from Ben McEvans. I also really like that one, which gives a little bit more organic cam shakes than the Nuke native cam shake tool.
And that one you put like 2 or 3 of them down to get different frequencies, and that's what I've been told.
Exactly. Yeah. You have like an overall sway motion, you have a stronger shake, and then you have a high frequency jitter. All of them together, and you have individual controls over them. So it's just, it's easier to get organic looking cam shakes.
Cam shakes, yeah.
Than just backing up. And yeah, cam shakes is another huge topic after flares. Like cam shakes might be the
Here's a question for you. What's your favorite filtering for any transformation? Lanzo 6, Lanzo 4, sync?
Wow, that's interesting. I'm not sure if I have a favorite filter, just whatever works for that task. I'm usually good with cubic because it gives nice results, and as soon as you get soft, you need to switch and find out what works.
Gotcha. I didn't know if Lanços 4 or 6 was like too much of a sharpening to a lot, you know, where you're like, just, you know, keep it cubic and then sharpen it a little bit at the end, you know.
Yeah, Lanços 4 and 6 get pretty sharp, but if you do this log to lin conversion first,
for them,
you can get quite good results with that. Yeah.
Don't forget the log to lin.
Exactly.
So we got Urheber Rec. Not necessarily a question, but I was well surprised to see that the author of these great tools I used a lot from Vienna. If you might send him nice greetings from 1020-1020. He will know. Matt, that'd be very nice. And maybe as a follow-up, if there is time, if Lukas knows of any good post houses situated in Vienna, Austria, he could recommend to upcoming VFX artists. Thanks for this great series, by the way. Matt, keep it up.
Yeah, I agree. Keep it up, Matt. Cool. Yeah, greetings back. I was an 1160 kid. So he will know. Yeah, that's funny.
So we've got something cryptic we don't know about unless we're from Vienna, Austria. So
that's actually just the zip code of the Viennese district.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so he grew up in the second district, or he lives in the second district apparently, and I grew up in the 16th.
Oh, okay. So it's like a in Chicago, we got these called the Wild 100s, which is the South Side of Chicago. And if you're any of the roads that are in the hundreds, it means there's like gang wars and shootings, and it's called the Wild 100s. So
yeah, there are stories like that from Vienna as well, but I guess they're not as wild as they are in the Wild West over there. Actually, I don't know that many post houses in Vienna, since I have never really, I mean, I have worked there in film production, so I know some of the film productions, but post houses, I know a couple, but they're like Arx Anima, there was Industrial Motion Art, and there were some other smaller ones. I think even Rise has an office in Vienna, or at least they had. Rise FX, they had an office in Vienna. There's Vienna FX. But no, I don't really know many of them, and I haven't worked at any of them at all, so I cannot speak for how it is there and what kind of projects they're working on these locations.
I think he's implying that you should start your own. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, let's see about that.
All right, it says, hi there, Matt. This is Mauricio de Oliveira. Hi there, Matt. Here goes my question, Lukas. If any, what was the inspiration behind FlareSuperStar? Is there anything we would do differently if we would start over today? Anything you would do differently if you start over today? Keep up the good work.
Oh, wow. That's a good question, I think. And then, so the first one, the inspiration behind it, it was actually, I mean, as we talked about previously or earlier today, it came out of necessity, kind of. Like, we were working on car commercials, and we were doing exactly that, car glints. So cars, they have this design lines, and they like that the light and the reflection of the sun really follows those design lines, and that produces beautiful glints in the camera, and also in real life if you're just outside watching cars. And the CG, the 3D supervisor, was not really complaining, but kind of asking, and he said, well, all those nice plate flares that we get from the shoot, they are all have those diverging cones. Why can't we have them? And the comp supervisor back at the time would say, well, we use the glint tool in Nuke. That's not how it works. They just have parallel lines, parallel streaks. This is what we get. This is the tools we have, basically. So we were constrained, and we were matching glints as close as we could, but you would never get them perfectly to match the plate. And at some point I was like, I think I have seen a tutorial on Wikipedia where I can create diverging rays with expressions. So I looked it up, and I started going into expressions and trying to recreate those kind of shapes that we were seeing in the plates there. And from there, exactly as you described it, it just this was the very basic behavior. I just wanted rays that would diverge from a center point. And yeah, from there I added controls, and I added more features, and I added, okay, maybe how could I adjust that kind of behavior? What could I do here and there? And then it just spun and became a tool. And at some point I started with the position mode, like, okay, this is awesome. So we could track glint onto cars, but then I thought, but with the glint tool, we can do that procedurally with just the spec path or whatever is coming in from 3D. How can I do that? And then I came up with, oh yeah, if I use a convolve and create a kernel, then this would work. And then, yeah, it became this very cool and rewarding experience that I was solving that problem that we had.
Now, was Video Copilot around when you were inventing this? And did they have divergent cones or no?
I think they have some, but yeah, they have shapes that work that way. So we could hand place some flares there, but in that studio we didn't have, we only had some node-locked licenses of optical flares, so we couldn't really use them widespread in production because only this one artist who had it installed on his machine at his desk could use it and need to pre-render it because it wouldn't work on the farm. It wouldn't work for anybody else in the studio. That was a constraint that we had. So that's why I started looking into FlareSuperStar. Yeah, and then it was just evolving with more and more stuff. Like, what else can I put into this tool that might be useful in the future?
Yeah, it's awesome. I think you basically created the, keying template. You made the flare template default here.
Maybe let's. Yeah, I'm curious to see if other people start picking this up and create their own stuff.
I think even like a mid-sized studio or a small studio, there might be some person there that might go, and they might dig in and I'm going to give that a try, and maybe they'll start to develop their own tool sets, That's part of their...
Yeah, totally. If you do, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or somewhere. I want to hear about it. You're probably not allowed to share it then if you do it in your studio, but just talking about it and getting an exchange might be interesting and just a conversation going.
The last question we have is Karan Kanase. Sir, please explain nodes in detail, like key mix, time warp, etc. Karan, this is the third time you've asked questions, and I'm not trying to be a mean guy. I'm just saying, please keep the questions particular to the guest. Thank you. We were discussing this last time with Xavier, how sometimes we get people that ask questions, and it's like, do a dance. It's like, it's like this is not their expertise. But anyway, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I could explain a key mix node, but I also feel like there are a lot of tutorials out there that explain like how Nuke functions and what the basic buttons are. So this is more, I guess, more on the advanced end to create some tools yourself and get into tool development, basically.
So, yeah, I mean, it's great. Well, thank you for your time, dude. It's been 2.5 hours here. Thanks for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon. Much appreciated. Had you stick with robotics, you would have probably invented Skynet, I'm assuming.
I think I would rather have gone into, space exploration and building rockets and stuff. I really like those kind of things.
Yeah, we have at our school, we have a whole hangar we have an actual airport on campus. We have a hangar. They got these giant, they look like pods from Star Wars Episode 1, and they're just like blasting engines and all this. I mean,
that sounds awesome. Like, I would feel comfortable around those kind of things. I would really like geek out.
Yeah, this is really cool. Purdue in general. It's like seeing so many different. And I hate to say it, but I've come from teaching liberal arts schools, which are a lot of video game kids. Like, I like playing video games, and I want to make them for a living, And it's kind of like nice to go into what I call the realist scientific end of the education system, and like get to people that really have to take the time to solve problems, and they don't have time to play video games, So that's just, anyway.
Yeah, kind of.
But anyway, thanks.
Especially if you work with that kind of stuff, you kind of stop playing it because, if you work on movies 8 hours a day and then you go home and watch another movie for 2.5 hours, then it's kind of your whole life is just movies at some point.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get out. I've been trying to, especially with COVID, I've just been trying to get people to go and do things that are not like, even if we're doing bowling or biking, getting out of the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's been weird here. We just had our mask mandate gone. I think we're the only place on the planet that has no mask mandate. But thankfully, everyone's getting vaccinated, and we're going to get through this nightmare. So.
Exactly. I think the US is pretty good with vaccines. Like people get vaccinated. We're a little bit behind on that in the EU. But
Yeah, that's
hope.
why SEAGRAPH has been delayed. It was supposed to be August, and they're delaying another year because of the international reality of getting everybody
Yeah.
vaccinated, which kind of sucks because I wanted to go to SEAGRAPH. But anyway.
Oh.
So anyway, sir,
Well.
thanks for coming on. Sorry for. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of the day, and again, much appreciated for all your help.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun talking about all that stuff. Hope it feels to be useful for some people at least.